I don't just talk about other people's stuff, I also make my own. Books in particular. To date, I have 4 books you can check out on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and the short story collection Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Hop on down to the description for Amazon links to all 4 books. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the Omni viewer, and I was recently in conversation with another one of my fellow kaiju tubers about how it seems like most of the kaiju content that's being put online these days is all about collectibles, and there's really no in-depth analysis of the movies happening recently. And I think that's kind of understandable because doing videos about collectibles is certainly far easier to do than writing a lengthy diatribe and in-depth breakdown of what different movies mean and how they affect you as a viewer. And collectible videos, all you have to do is just set up a camera in front of the things, turn them around, and you've got yourself a video. Though I do miss those kind of analytical videos, and I really have been meaning to do more of them myself. Anyway, I've got these 2 figures, and I figured I'd review them for you. I have the Playmates Baragon and the Bandai Final Wars Manda. They both arrived pretty recently, practically on top of each other, and I figured why not give them a look because they are fairly new. I know some people may very well be curious, and hey, we don't get figures of Baragon and Manda very often, so let's take a closer look. Let us start with Baragon, the most inexplicably popular kaiju of them all. And I say inexplicably because even though he's barely had any appearances, he is surprisingly big in Japan, probably because he looks like a giant puppy. But either way, this is the Playmates figure, and the question is, how does it work as a figure? Well, as you can imagine, it's got all the typical articulation points: the head, the arms, the legs, the tail. Actually, interesting note about the tail. I'll put a picture of it up here for you. It attaches with the usual socket and slot attachment that these figures usually have, but curiously, you can see inside Baragon before you put the tail on. Other figures like Gorosaurus, where you need to attach the tail, the socket is plugged up, basically. You can't see inside of the figure, but with Baragon, to my surprise, you can, if you have a flashlight, and you can see sort of the inner workings because the body is hollow. It's not that big of a deal, mind you, I just thought it was curious to point out. In terms of detail, Baragon looks really good. As you can see, despite the fact that he's usually a quadruped monster, this figure is in a bipedal stance. It's also specified on the package as being the 1965 version, which means this is the Baragon from Frankenstein Conquers the World, as opposed to the one from Destroy All Monsters. And obviously it's not the GMK one. Details actually look really good. They've got all the folds in the skin. They've got the little square texturing on the belly that runs all the way down the base of the tail. The ears have a sort of curvature to them that I guess makes them a little bit sturdier than if they had been flat, and they're pressed back sort of as opposed to being pushed forward, which gives them more of an aggressive look. The eyes are well painted. The teeth are all individual pieces. Like if you compare it to Gorosaurus, the teeth on Gorosaurus are all sort of, well, they kind of cheated with Gorosaurus because they have a line basically of the gums and the teeth are sort of part of that. Whereas with Baragon, all the teeth are individual. It's just a interesting little detail I noticed. In terms of how it all comes together, it mostly works. The feet do not sit entirely flat on the ground, or rest, I should say. So there's gonna be a little bit of unevenness depending on the kind of terrain you put them on. And you may notice looking at him front on, the horn kind of curves to the left. This is his left. So it's not pointing out exactly straight. put him next to a more accurate depiction like the Mezco version, as you can see here, and you'll see that it's not necessarily the highest quality figure, but overall, I would say it is darn good quality. Once again, although we do see this weird tendency of not painting the back features all the way down the tail, just kind of stops. If there was more of a gradient, that would look a little bit nicer. But the paint on those things actually looks really good as well, as you can see. Like, there's not really a whole lot of bleed. They have the line separating them down the back. Yeah, I really don't have that many complaints about Baragon, to be honest. He looks really good. The Playmates line has been up and down with some really good figures, and then, of course, there's Shin Godzilla, which they failed at twice. But when it comes to the more classic monsters, I gotta say, they've really been knocking it out of the park. And in terms of height, if we put him alongside the other figures, you'll see he's just a little bit shorter than Jet Jaguar and Rodan, but at the same time, as you saw earlier, taller than Gorosaurus. So overall, not bad. For as infrequent as Baragon figures are, this one turned out incredibly well. I wonder if this means a GMK Baragon is in the future. I guess it depends on how well this one does. And then we have Manda. When was the last time a Manda figure was released? I certainly can't think of one, and certainly not from Bandai. These figures are very unusual. And of course, as mentioned, this is the Final Wars version, so it's not the classic Atragon version or the one that appears in Destroy All Monsters. That's reflected in how it's colored sort of a teal or sea green color with a beige underbelly, and how the horns are sculpted, features on the face like the pointed chin and whatnot. Articulation on the figure is kind of limited. You can twist the head all the way around. That's it. I know there's another segment here. I can't get it to move, and I don't want to risk breaking it. So as far as I know, there's only one point of articulation, but if the tail can move as well, feel free to correct me down there. You may notice, of course, the most notable thing about this figure is how long it is. The Manda, of course, is one of the bigger kaiju in terms of sheer length, but Bandai figures normally don't get that long. Manda does, though. Rodan is usually one of the bigger figures because of wingspan, and as you can see, Manda stretches even past Rodan, and this is, of course, the Final Wars Rodan. I actually checked it out. The only figure this is comparable to are the Godzilla vs. Kong mega figures, which it is just shorter than. So that is a sizable figure right there. And overall, not bad. The head has some good detail on it. The eyes stand out with a nice bright orange. The tongue is actually not sculpted into the upper or lower jaws, but is actually individual from those jaws. I don't know if that's even the right way to say it, but I'm just making this up as I go. That's actually kind of notable because usually with these figures, the mouth is either closed or the tongue is just part of the lower jaw. So having the tongue be separate is a nice feature. Paint is a little bit weird on the back, as you can see, because they sort of did an airbrushing for the spikes on the first little segment of the neck, and then the rest of it is just the same color as the rest of the body. They didn't even bother giving any other variation, which, oh well. Otherwise, the paint on the bottom still looks good, but it's mostly going to be sitting like this anyway. You won't be able to get it to sit completely flat unless you turn the head like this, and then that just looks awkward. But I'm sure you could mount it on top of something. And being a Final Wars figure, of course, how does it look with other Final Wars figures? Well, it can be hard to say because Manda never actually appears on screen with any other kaiju, just with the Gotengo. But overall, I'd say the scaling is good enough that you can make a display with them and have it look pretty well. Of course, because Manda is so big, you can also put Manda alongside other bigger figures like the Playmates Baragon. And I say bigger because if you line them up next to some or other figures, even though Baragon is shorter, you can tell the proportions make him look bigger than certain figures like this Final Wars Godzilla. But Manda can actually look good with just about any kind of monster, I think. And that's about the long and the short of it, so to speak. Not bad in terms of figures we rarely ever get to see. So, if you get the chance, and you can afford it, of course, they're probably worth picking up. Again, though, don't spend beyond your means, only if you're able to afford them. But I do think they are worthwhile additions to any collection. Now I just need to find space for them, so wish me luck in that department. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni viewer signing off.
Congratulations, you reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to consider supporting us on Patreon. Of course, the other way to support us is to go to Amazon and check out our books: Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Also check the description for links to DeviantArt and other platforms we operate. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.